This is TVCL, and welcome to the Practically True podcast. There is a direct connection between logic and life itself, and this connection is the Logos. On the surface, these two things might appear to be separate. On the one hand, logic is cold and almost mechanical, whereas life is warm and full of vitality. Yet, they relate to each other through a common core. Drawing this relation could be useful because it could allow us to understand how the idea of Logos allows us to draw a deep connection between all of the truths that we can find. It could help us to understand that the same principle that governs abstract thinking is the same principle that governs our decisions, our ability to live, and even the relation between good and evil. That there is such a relationship between logic and life means that we can have a better understanding of both and how we should relate to them if we understand this great principle that binds them together. That is what we shall attempt to do here. To begin with, we can consider the idea of Logos. What does it mean? Well, the concept of Logos is very rich and ties many ideas together. In one measure, it refers to one's speech. In another, it refers to order, or more specifically, divine order. Whether we might think of that as a pattern, or an equation, or some kind of great song that everything in the universe is dancing to, that too is called the Logos. Indeed, one of the titles of Jesus Christ is the Logos, commonly translated as the Word, or the Word of God. And so, of course, this draws a connection between the idea of Logos as one's speech, as if God spoke and this was his Logos, and the idea of order. We might combine the two ideas together and say that God sang, and this song, this divine, ordered, harmonious pattern that he continues to sing is his Logos, the divine order of the universe. Now, what is also contained in the idea of Logos is the idea of logic, and more importantly, reason. Indeed, this is why Logos is the root word for our current word, logic. Anyone who has seen my other work might have seen how logic is connected to reason, because the term logic can refer to a number of distinct ideas, but one of the things that it refers to is the faculty that allows us to use our reason. That is to say, we are rational creatures because we can do logic, and when we are thinking logically, we are reasoning. Therefore, Logos is a term that refers to our reason. When the ancient Greeks referred to the idea that we as humans used Logos or have Logos, they referred to the fact that we have the faculty of reason. And so we can draw a connection between all of these ideas. Logos is a concept that refers at once to the idea of speech, to the divine order of the universe, and also to our faculty of reason. Now, what's also important is that our faculty of reason is basically the faculty that allows us to spot, or should we say, avoid, contradictions. That is to say, contradictions are contrary to reason, and as such, contradictions are contrary to Logos. That allows us to have an outline of the idea of Logos, and to draw a connection between it and the idea of logic. But what does this have to do with life? It would appear that the answer to this question allows us to understand why reason is so important for living, and why God is called the living God. Okay, so let's start with this first idea, that reason is important for living. Elsewhere in my work, I have explained that we cannot actively make decisions if we completely forego our reason. In summary, this is because ideas that contradict themselves cancel themselves out, we have to assume a basic level of consistency in order to posit an idea, let alone a goal. Simply put, if your goal is to walk, you have to assume that walking is walking, at the very least. If you try to forego reason and assume that walking is not walking, how can you even posit the idea of going for a walk, let alone actually going for one? And so, you need to assume reason. That is, you need to exercise your logos in order to make decisions. But does this mean that you have to use your logos in order to live? Pay attention to this attribute of logos, that it is non-contradictory. Our rational faculty, which is our logos, does not allow for contradictions. But if logos is also the divine order of the universe, does the same idea apply? The answer appears to be yes. The divine order of the universe doesn't allow for contradictions either, and it is this point that speaks to the heart of what we are trying to explore here. Right, so we need to assume reason in order to make decisions actively. But do we need reason in order to live in general? The answer is that even if we don't consciously use reason, we cannot do anything that is genuinely irrational. For example, it would appear that we don't need our reason in order to sleep, or to breathe, or to digest our food, just like animals do. However, we can no more breathe and not breathe any more than an ox, a cat, or a rabbit can. Indeed, we can no more do this than a rabbit can be a non-rabbit. The point is that there is a way that things are, and those that are not in line with this way of things simply cannot be. And of course, this way, or what might be more properly called the order of things, is the logos. If anything tried to contradict this order, if anything genuinely tried to contradict the logos, it would find that its effects would be in vain. Just as the man would find if he tried to walk, yet not walk, or the rabbit would find if it could ever try to breathe, yet not breathe. Yet, of course, the rabbit does not have logos because it cannot reason. What does this tell us? Well, it tells us that not only does logos have various meanings, but it exists in various places. There is the logos, which orders all things, and then each of us has our own logos, or share of that divine logos, which is the faculty that allows us to recognize this order. Rabbits have no logos of their own, yet are subject to it, whereas mankind is at once subject to the logos and has a faculty of their own that allows them to be conscious of it. In any case, whether one possesses the faculty of reason or not, the important thing is that because all is subject to the divine order, nothing can be contrary to it. What's more, this is not and need not be an empirical claim. We need not examine the entire universe with our own eyes to check whether anything exists which is contrary to logos. Indeed, it follows directly from the nature of logos. That is to say, it follows logically from the nature of logic itself. Logos is the way that things are, and logic dictates that things cannot be what they are not. Therefore, it follows that whatever is contrary to logos cannot be. Now, this claim may well give rise to immediate protest. There are at least two major challenges to this claim that we could consider. First, that this claim is simply wrong. After all, how can we say that nothing is contrary to logos when we see everything from corruption to evil to insanity? Aren't there a myriad of things which are contrary to logos? Second, even if it is true, it's trivial. After all, What interest do we have in recognizing that things are what they are and not what they are not? If all is simply logos and nothing can be contrary to it, does the idea not become so broad that it becomes meaningless? Or, at the very least, uninteresting? Both of these challenges can and should be answered, because it appears that the conclusions that have been reached can allow us to understand more about the relationship between good and evil, the nature of Christ, the will of God, and the consequences of our decisions. And so, let's begin with the first challenge. Don't we perceive many things that contradict the Logos? Indeed, if we are Christians, how do we explain evil? Don't many contradict the will of God? Let's take the example of insanity, or the fact that people can have irrational beliefs and ideas. Does this prove that Logos can be contradicted? Firstly, irrational beliefs are the more important issue, because some things that are called insane might not genuinely be irrational. Let's look at an irrational belief. We can use a very simple example. 2 plus 2 equals 5. This belief is irrational because it is a contradiction. 2 is half of 4 by definition, not 5. For 2 plus 2 to equal 5, 2 must be something that it is not. We could ask whether someone can in fact believe that 2 plus 2 equals 5, or whether they can only posit the idea. Yet, for argument's sake, let's assume that someone can. Therefore, if the claim is that nothing can be contrary to Logos, and people can believe that 2 plus 2 equals 5, is the claim wrong? No. Logos allows the belief to be. What it does not allow is for the belief to be true. There is nothing contrary to Logos in the fact that people hold a particular belief, even a contradictory one. What would be contrary would be for a belief to be a belief and a non-belief at the same time. To put it another way, to merely posit a contradictory belief does not bring a negation of Logos into existence. For example, the belief that a square with 3 sides exists does not bring one into existence. At most, it would bring the belief into existence, the notion, the idea, the shadow of a picture, if one could even picture a square with 3 sides. What the belief would not do is allow a square with 3 sides to exist. After all, such a thing is contrary to Logos, and cannot be. We can posit things that are contrary to Logos, but never realize them. Yet, why does this matter? Isn't this all about numbers and geometry? The reason why this matters is because it applies to good and evil. End of part 1.